Well, good morning, church family. It's good to see you today. I'd like to again, even as Paul already did, welcome you if you're new with us today. My name is Brent, one of the pastors here in the church family. It's wonderful to be present today. I'm going to invite our children to be dismissed down in the children's ministry wing, and as they go, you could pray for them that God would speak truth to them. And concerning our children, also would like to remind you, and we've been a little bit remiss in announcing this, that we have a wonderful preschool that meets 3 days a week here at Estacada First Baptist Church, and we need a preschool teacher for one of our morning classes, and you can contact our church office and pick up an application there. It's approximately, it's 3 days a week and approximately 3 hours a day. Some additional time in there as well. So we'd love to talk with you about that. And if you know some people that would be interested, send them our way as well. So we are in the book of Psalms. We've been there for a number of weeks now. This is week number 9. And today one of the psalm that we look at, Psalm 37, is often called one of the wisdom psalms. Has the feel a little bit like the Proverbs and the wise and the foolish and all that sort of thing. If we could just lay the framework for that before we read it together. It's like there's this drama being played out. And so this passage, as you read it, you'll know that the wicked are mentioned often. But also the righteous are mentioned. But then in the midst of all of that, there is Yahweh. And this is one of those psalms that uses the very personal covenant name of God, that is Yahweh. So look for those characters as we read this psalm. One more thing about this psalm, it's what we call an alphabet psalm. We don't see it in the English, but in the Hebrew letters are progressive throughout the psalm. This one's a little bit unique in that the first Hebrew letter is there, and then there's 2 verses in the next Hebrew letter, and so forth and so on, except for a few exceptions. So just to capture that a little bit as we read it, when it goes up on the screen, you'll see the Hebrew letter that kind of designates the different verses, all right? Don't worry about pronouncing those Hebrew letters. We'll just let the Hebrew go for right now. Would you stand together with me? And again, to capture this, Jason is at the microphone over here. And I'd like those of you on his side to read the second screen, the second verses that go up, and then we'll alternate through. So you guys are reading with me. I don't care what screen you look at, just read with me, all right? All right. I'll look back there. So this is of David, that's the superscription. Sometimes in the Hebrew, that superscription is also actually categorized as verse 1, but we don't do that in our English Bibles. So read together with me. Do not fret because of evildoers. Be not envious toward wrongdoers, for they will wither quickly like the grass and fade like the green herb.
Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart.
Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he will do it. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your judgment as the noonday.
Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who carries out wicked schemes.
Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil doing. For evildoers will be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord, they will inherit the land.
Yet a little while, and the wicked man will be no more, and you will look carefully for his place, and he will not be there. But the humble will inherit the land, and will delight themselves in abundant prosperity.
The wicked plots against the righteous, and gnashes at him with his teeth. The Lord laughs at him, for he sees his day is coming.
The wicked have drawn the sword and bent their bow to cast down the afflicted and the needy, to slay those who are upright in conduct. Their sword will enter their own heart, and their bows will be broken.
Better is the little of the righteous than the abundance of the many wicked. For the arms of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord sustains the righteous.
The Lord knows the days of the blameless, and their inheritance will be forever. They will not be ashamed in the times of evil, and in the days of famine they will have abundance.
But the wicked will perish, and the enemies of the Lord will be like the glory of the pastures. They vanish, they look like smoke, they vanish away.
The wicked borrows and does not pay back, but the righteous is gracious and gives. For those blessed by him will inherit the land, but those cursed by him will be cut off.
The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way. When he falls, he will not be hurled headlong, because the Lord is the one who holds his hand.
I have been young, and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, or his descendants begging bread. All day long he is gracious and lends, and his descendants are a blessing.
Depart from evil and do good, so you will abide forever. For the Lord loves justice and does not forsake his godly ones. They are preserved forever.
But the descendants of the wicked will be cut off. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever.
The mouth of the righteous utters wisdom, and his tongue speaks justice. The law of his God is in his heart. His steps do not slip.
The wicked spies upon the righteous and seeks to kill him. The Lord will not leave him in his hand or let him be condemned when he is judged.
Wait for the Lord and keep his way. He will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you will see it.
I have seen the wicked, violent man spreading himself like a luxuriant tree in its native soil. Then he passed away, and lo, he was no more. I sought for him, but he could not be found.
Mark the blameless man, behold the upright, for the man of peace will have a posterity. But transgressors will be altogether destroyed. The posterity of the wicked will be cut off.
But the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their strength in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them, because they take refuge in him.
Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for your word again, for the Holy Spirit that teaches, that has inspired this text, and then helps us understand it, and even brings application. So we entrust ourselves to you, to the truth of your word, and we pray in Jesus. Amen. You may be seated. Thank you. And thank you, Jason. So I hope you noticed the different players in this drama. There's the wicked, mentioned 14 times. There's the righteous, mentioned 9 times, referred to in many other terms as well. And then there's Yahweh, the Lord, is mentioned all through there. So we want to walk through this psalm and just look at the way of the righteous, the way of the wicked, and the ways of the Lord. And so as you have an outline, you can follow along. The ways of the wicked, or the wicked and their ways, to say it that way. As we think of wickedness, I just want to first point out that wickedness is primarily a matter of the heart. While this text, as we'll see in a moment, deals with actions and activities, it stems from the heart. Jeremiah captures this in Jeremiah chapter 17. It says, "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" In the King James Version, that idea of sick is translated wicked. It is desperately wicked. Jesus spoke to that himself. He says, for from within, out of the heart of men proceed all these things. Then he lists all these things: evil thoughts, fornications, theft, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting, wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. And then he says, all these things proceed from where? From within, and defile the man. So it starts at the heart level. So that's a dark list that you see up there that Jesus refers to. And as we go through this psalm, there's these dark activities, but it stems from a heart that is separated from God and resistant to God. We don't know who exactly David is referring to when he wrote this psalm. There's lots of wicked people around him, some of them very close to him, that were seeking evil for him all the time. And yet, as we reflect on our lives, we see that wickedness around us, sometimes very close to us. Verse 1, as we look at this text, says they're evildoers, they're wrongdoers, they carry out wicked schemes. And again, you can go through David's life, and you can look at those schemes, even by his sons and by those in high places around him that were seeking to bring him down. So this evil that is resident in the heart is not a placid, neutral evil that just sits there. It is expressed. It is active in evil doing, in wrongdoing, in schemes that are hatched. As we go on in verse 12, we again see the ways of the wicked. It says they plot against the righteous and gnash at him with their teeth. That means to grate or to grind, and certainly that has an idea of anger and frustration and agitation at the righteous. In verse 14, we go on and it says, they draw the sword and they bend the bow. So this frustration and this agitation towards the righteous and ultimately towards God himself expresses itself even in violence toward the righteous. I want to have you go back in your mind to remember we had that young sister here from Turkey. And still the wicked are against the righteous who seek after God. And her husband was killed there in Turkey with a drawn sword. They brought him down. Verse 21, it continues. It says, the wicked borrow but do not repay. What's that called? I just think it's funny as I read that. They steal. It's not just an oversight. You know, sometimes we might borrow something and don't repay it. That's an oversight. But they purposely take and they don't pay back. So it reveals this greediness in them that doesn't matter what somebody else has, they want it and they want more of it and they will kill to get it, and it doesn't matter who they take it from. Going on through this text in verse 32, it says, they spy on the righteous and seek to kill them. And again, I just want to remind you, when David writes this is very real to him. Even as he writes it in a poetic way, there were people around him that were always looking for a weakness in his kingdom and in his character so that they could bring him down. They would spy to see how they could take over or to kill him or put him out of the way. And yet then, as I thought on that, that's real for many of you as well at your workplace, isn't it? People looking real closely at you, kind of spying on you to look for the weakness, to look for the failure so they can push you down even further with it. So we relate to these ideas, we relate to the challenge that David experienced even in his life. Some of you live in a fishbowl even at home. Maybe you're the only believer in your family, and so you gather together at these wonderful times of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it's kind of miserable, isn't it? Because you're being looked at so closely by those in your family. So this wickedness, just as we scan that in even a surface way, expresses itself very clearly in the life of David or around the life of David, expresses itself very clearly around us. And the psalmist states it very matter-of-factly. He says it's just the way it is. There are wicked. There are wrongdoers. There are evildoers. It's life. So the concern of this psalm, and as the psalmist continues to rise, is not so much that there's evil people and that they do evil things. The problem that he seems to focus in on is that these evildoers, these wrongdoers around him, prosper as they do it. They seem to get away with all this evil. They seem to get away with all the wrong. You know, we tell our children, I was told that crime never pays. And yet as you look at this psalm, and even as we look at life in general, sometimes it pays very handsomely, does it not? So look at verse 7. He says these people, these evildoers, the wrongdoers, they what? They prosper in their way. Verse 16 says, they live in abundance, even though they do these evil things. And verse 35, I love how he captures it here. It says, I've seen a wicked, violent man spreading himself like a luxuriant tree in its native soil. In other words, just soaking in all he can, even from others, and just enjoying the prosperity. So as David captures those things, it's almost like it's a faith challenge for him. He seems to be a little bit frustrated, maybe even a little bit confused. How is this? And why is this? It's almost like his theology wasn't matching reality for him. But it's not just him. We go to another psalm in Psalm 73, written by another psalmist. It starts by saying, surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet came close to stumbling, and my steps had almost slipped. Why? For I was envious of the arrogant, as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no pains in their death, and their body is fat. They are not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like mankind. This psalmist captures it as well. The prosperity of who? The wicked. The prosperity of those who are wrongdoers. And that tendency, even captured it there as well, the tendency to be envious, to be covetous of them and their life. As I explored this, even the prophet Jeremiah is stymied and troubled by this reality. Jeremiah chapter 12 says, righteous are you, O Lord, when I complain to you, yet I would plead my case before you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all who are treacherous thrive? You plant them and they take root and they grow and they produce fruit. You are near in their mouth and far from their heart. The treacherous do what? Thrive. The wicked prosper. So even Jeremiah, as he approaches, as he writes, it says, Lord, you're righteous. I know that. I understand that. Yet this doesn't make any sense to me. This is frustrating to me. This is challenging to me. David has the concern. Asaph, the writer of that other psalm, has the concern. Jeremiah has the concern. The concern isn't that wickedness is present. The concern is not that there are evil people doing bad things. The concern is these evil people doing bad things seem to be doing really well in life. But there's three players in this drama: the wicked, the righteous, and Yahweh. So what about the righteous? How do they live? What are their ways? How do they even respond to this? Well, as we dig into this text, there's one main negative exhortation, something that the righteous shouldn't do. There's only one, but it's stated 3 times in verse 1, and verse 7, and verse 8. And it says, do not what? Don't fret. That's an interesting word. It's translated in many ways. In your Bible, maybe it says, don't be preoccupied with them. Maybe it says, don't be upset, or don't worry. But the Hebrew word, it's stronger than that. This Hebrew word, when it's most often translated, it means to glow or to burn or to blaze up, to be kindled with anger. So the exhortation is, don't get heated up about these guys. Don't get agitated. Don't get hot. Doesn't matter that they're living a good life right now. Don't let that get under your skin. Now that's easy to say, isn't it? That's easy to preach. I've just learned that I can preach some things and recognize that's really hard to live out. I think we would all recognize that. Sometimes we see that going on and it just gets frustrating. We look at what we're dealing with in our life and our desire to seek after the Lord. We're looking at somebody else with no regard for the Lord at all, and they seem to be doing so much better. Maybe it's somebody at work. You know those people that work that know how to work the system. They know how to manipulate the facts. They know how to get close to all the right people. And they're not good people, but they get the good promotion. Maybe it's a student at school who receives the recognition. Maybe it's that student that gets the scholarship to the college that you wanted to go to, but yet they're selfish and demeaning. Maybe it's that businessman that you know that cheats, cuts corners, and yet continues to make a bulging profit. Does that frustrate anybody? Just me, huh? Then we see some on the news. We don't know them. They're the multimillionaires that seem to escape the harsh realities of life, and yet they make their millions deceptively and immorally. The psalmist says, don't fret about them. Don't be envious. Don't get heated up. Easy to read. Easy to preach. Hard to do. So what's interesting with those negative, that one negative statement repeated, he intertwines in there, in a very poetic way, what we need to be doing positively. Because I always hate to land on the negative. Just don't do that. I think it's much more effective if we say, let's do this. Amen? The way that we can not fret about this situation and not get heated is by doing some things proactively. So what does he say? He says in verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Trust in the Lord. It has the idea of be confident in the Lord, be sure about him. So if we want to not fret and get frustrated about the realities of the evil in our world and that they prosper, it means we turn our attention away from them and look at the Lord and say, Lord, I'm going to trust you. But even that's kind of preachy. What does trust look like? I think trust looks like the rest of this verse. Trust looks like doing good. Trust is not just actively sitting around waiting for God to do something. Trust is not sitting on the sideline watching God do something or hoping God will do something. Trust is really stepping onto the field and being actively engaged in this world where all these evil people are. He says, trust in the Lord and what? Do good in your life. Do good. Sounds a lot like that challenge that we're given in James, that faith is seen in works. We trust God, but then that works out in our lives in some very active and proactive ways. Please understand that trust, when God says, trust me, it's not an invitation to be a spiritual couch potato and surfing the church channels waiting for some sort of inspiration. No, that's not what trust means. Trust is putting on our shoes, being engaged in a world that is full of evil people and evil activities. Trust is not covering our heads hoping that something good will happen, but trust is actively trying to bring that good about through the power of God wherever he's placed us. Ephesians reminds us that we've been created in Christ Jesus for good works. We've not been created to somehow be displayed by God as these beautiful people. We've been created to be actively engaged in a world and participate with God in the world. It's interesting, the Apostle Peter emphasizes this often, and it's interesting, the context of Peter is he's writing to people who are being bashed by evil people. And so as they're being bashed by the evil culture around them, here's how he exhorts them in verse 12 of 1 Peter 2. He says, keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your what? Good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. He says, you're surrounded by evil people. Now, all those evil people see all your good deeds, and that just may have a huge impact on them. Look what he says just a couple verses later. For such is the will of God, that by doing right, you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. You know what wicked men are? They're foolish men. Foolish men are wicked. Foolish people are wicked. And so we can talk and talk and talk, but this says, do the right thing. Do the good deed. Engage them, and you just may shut them up. See, our faith is to be an active faith. Trust God, do good, and then it goes on to say, cultivate faithfulness. That's kind of a troubling Hebrew phrase, and I say that because it's translated many different ways. But the translation that I want to suggest to you that makes more sense is feed on God's faithfulness. Trust the Lord, do good, and feed daily on his faithfulness. Is God always faithful? Amen. It's who he is. It's what he does. He's just faithful. And so this passage is saying, in the midst of all these evil people doing all these evil things, trust God, do good, and daily just feed on his faithfulness to you. You know, there's only really one way to see how faithful God is to us. I shouldn't say there's one way. The way that we most often see how God is so faithful to us is when we step into those uncomfortable zones and God shows up. And he says, yeah, I'll carry you here. Somebody once said, we only know the strength of the anchor when we experience the severity of the storm. And so God calls us to step into that storm, to do the good thing in the difficult situation. I was reminded with a quote this week. I send those pastor spams out, and every once in a while some of you respond, which, by the way, I really appreciate. It lets me know that you actually read those things. They gave me this quote. It said, ships in harbor are safe, but that's not what ships are built for. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land. Live in it. Find God to be faithful as you launch out and engage it. And see, that's all in the context of don't fret. And sometimes we get so frustrated with all the evil that's going on that we become stagnant because we get so frustrated. Look what else he says in verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord. If we're not going to fret, we're going to just delight in the Lord. And that's just a beautiful word. It means be comfortable, enjoy and relish the Lord. It has the idea of being secure, finding enjoyment in. So even in the midst of doing good, even in the midst of an environment where there's constantly evil people doing evil things, he says, delight yourself. Find joy in the Lord every day. As I was thinking about that, we're getting ready here pretty soon to introduce our next Tibetan outreach team that's going out in March. And I've been privileged to go on 6 of those teams. And I just have to say, those trips in some ways are grueling and difficult. And yet what I've always found on those trips, that as you engage in those grueling, difficult situations, you can delight in these people that you're with in that. And I think in that same way as God sends us out into difficult situations where it's someplace at work, or maybe it's actually what you're experiencing at home, that we can, in the midst of that, just delight and enjoy the God that is with us in the midst of it. And I'm not going to camp on it right now, but do you see the wonderful promise of that verse? As you find great joy in the Lord, what does he do? And he gives you those desires, those heart desires. And I think that's there because it's in contrast to all the evil people who are getting all these good things, but God gives you something better. What does he give you? He gives you something deep inside, what you really desire. Goes on to say in verse 5, commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him. So as we think of this exhortation to not fret, we're to commit ourselves to the Lord, and that word, it's interesting, it has the idea of to roll your life or this burden onto the Lord. I think it's interesting because sometimes life feels so heavy that we can't even carry it. So it's just roll it. Just commit it to the Lord. It reminds me of 1 Peter chapter 5, where we're to cast all our anxiety on him. Again, you see the emphasis is on the Lord. It's not on the evil people. Verse 7, if we're going to fret not, this exhortation is to rest in the Lord. Wait patiently for him. This idea of resting and waiting is not in conflict with being active and doing good. This idea of rest and wait has the idea of just letting God deal with those things that we can't deal with, and engaging in the things that God has given us to participate in. Wait patiently. Waiting patiently means we have to evaluate our concept of God. Is God somebody that's really going to show up when he should? Or is he going to be late? Can we wait expectantly? Maybe that helps us if we take that word patiently and put in there expectantly. We can wait expecting that God is going to do what he is supposed to do. Amen? We don't have to step into his role and accomplish something that only he can do. And folks, every time we do that, we mess it up. When I was young, for some reason, my parents thought I should be involved in all kinds of things. And one of those things was that I took trumpet lessons for a number of years. That doesn't have anything to do with the story, but for some reason, whenever my mom would drop me off for trumpet lessons, I don't know if it was the time of day or where it was or whatever, when she would come back to get me afterwards, she was always late. Now, she always showed up, but she was always late. It was interesting as I processed that over the years, because this went on for a long time, and I'd say, Mom, you're a little late, and she would make some reason why she was late. But I knew she was always going to come. And so I could wait expectantly. You see how that works for God? Is God going to show up at the right time? Is it going to seem late? Yes. Yeah. It will often seem late. It will often seem terribly late. But it's God's time. And so we can wait expectantly. We can rest and wait patiently because he's going to show up. And as we get to the end, the psalm says just that. He's going to show up and bring justice at just the right time. So wait. How? Patiently. So we see the wicked in their ways. They plot and they scheme. They gnash their teeth, they bend the bow, they pull the sword, they look for an opening to try to bring the righteous down. And all of that, what do? Prosper. And then there's the righteous in their way. They don't fret, They trust and they stay faithfully engaged. They delight in the Lord. They commit their way to the Lord, and they rest and they wait patiently for the Lord. So we have the righteous, we have the wicked, but there's another player, isn't there? And we really shouldn't even call him a player. He's the creator, he's the writer, he's the producer, he's the director of the whole drama. What does this say, this psalm, this drama about Yahweh? And we're going to just limit a few thoughts, grab a few things out of here. Look at this, verse 13. Read it out loud with me. The Lord laughs at him, for he sees his day is coming. Yahweh, what? Laughs. That's an amazing statement. You know, and that's not the only place in Scripture it says that. Psalm 2, verse 4, and Psalm 59, verse 8, all say the same thing. The Lord laughs at this situation. He laughs at them, the evil. Why does he laugh? The Lord laughs at the wicked. Kind of look at this because he knows the wicked day is coming. And they just don't see it. They can't comprehend it. They seem to be blind to it. The wicked think it's all about this life and gaining everything now, and they're just blind to the fact that there's something even more important in the future. The Lord laughs. And I don't think that's in a mocking way, kind of like, na, 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 na. I don't think it's like that. I don't think it's even a laugh of pleasure. I was thinking of Ezekiel. It says, the Lord takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. So it's not like he's laughing in a mocking way. But what sort of laugh is this? I think it's a laugh of confident control. Where, yeah, I know where this is going. You ever do that with your kids? Your teenagers? You've told them now, here's what you shouldn't do, because if you do this, yeah, it's just not good. So you turn and you walk away and you look at their life, and what are they doing? They're doing that very thing and go, I told them that. And I know what's going to happen. And it's almost a painful laugh in a way, isn't it? You know it. So it's interesting as you look at the contrast. We tend to fret about the wicked, but God does what? He laughs because he knows so clearly how it all ends. Look at verse 17. It says, the arms of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord sustains the righteous. That's a beautiful truth. He sustains, he strengthens, he energizes the righteous. He lifts up our arms. I think that's in contrast. The arms of the wicked are broken and made powerless, but our arms, the arms of the righteous, are strengthened by him. He sustains. And church, that's just a good reminder that as we engage the world, it's not our strength, is it? It's not our wisdom or our might, but it's the Lord that is actually empowering us. Look at verse 18. The Lord knows the days of the blameless, and their inheritance will be forever. The Lord knows our days. He knows our experience. He knows what we're dealing with. He knows how many days we have. He knows the reward that we will one day experience. That word know there, it's an interesting Hebrew word. It means to know personally, and it means to know by experience, not to just to be aware of it. It's not just that the Lord is aware of what's going on in our lives. He knows what's going on because he is personally there with us to experience it. Oftentimes I have an opportunity to talk to you or other people about difficulties in your lives, and I cherish that opportunity. But you tell me your stories and you tell me your situation and say, do you know what I mean? And I honestly have to say, I don't. I sympathize. But I don't know what you mean. I've not experienced that. And to be honest, sometimes after I hear stories, I say, I don't want to know what you've experienced. And so I'm thankful at that moment, and I hope you are as well, that the Lord knows what you mean. He knows how you feel. He's right there, and He is experiencing that very thing. The Lord knows the days of the blameless. He knows how many there are, and He knows what's in each one of them. That's why He's that perfect counselor. Just a couple more, and I love this next picture in verse 23 and 24. The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and He delights in his way. And when he falls, he will not be hurled headlong, because the Lord is the one who holds his hand. What I love about this little bunch of verses is it starts with what the Lord is doing at the beginning, establishing the steps. It ends with Him holding the hand, and what's in the middle? The righteous falling. It's like it's wrapped up with what God is doing, but in the middle, we continue to stumble. So it says our paths are established in life by the Lord. It means He's leading us where He wants us to go. The Lord has a plan for us, a very specific plan. And can I remind you that God always accomplishes His plan in our lives? So I don't know what the evil is in your life right now and how it's affecting you, but can I just remind you, God has you there for a reason? Look at it. The steps of a man are established by the Lord. He's leading you where you need to go. And yet we still fall. Why do we fall? Is it God's fault? No, it's not God's fault. Maybe it's the wicked that are tripping us up. Maybe we just get distracted, but we fall. But that's not the end of the story, is it? It says even when we fall, we don't go head first so that we can't not get up again. Because somebody's holding our hand. Who is that? Isn't that beautiful? Yahweh is the one who holds His hand. The creator of the universe holds our hand. I hope you can just revel in that for a moment. I look back through my life and I have fallen any number of times. And as I look forward in my life, no doubt there's going to be more falls in my future. But I can get back up again because somebody's holding my hand. And it's actually Him that brings me through. I think of Peter, the Apostle Peter. Did he fall? Certainly. And it's interesting, even before that fall, Jesus tells Peter, you're going to fall. It's going to happen, but I'm going to carry you through. I'm going to pick you up, and you're going to make a huge impact. I love that image. And, around our church family right now, we have all these toddlers, and I love to see them coming in the front doors, and there's a little toddler, and Dad's holding her hand, and Dad's leading them along. And sure enough, they stumble. They got distracted. They didn't pay attention. They lost their balance. But they don't go down because Dad squeezes a little bit tighter. Says, come on, let's go. I love that it doesn't say, because we hold on to His hand. Because I let go of His hand often. He holds on to mine. I want to wrap up by putting a few verses together that speak about the justice of God. Verse 28 and verse 32 and verse 40. The Lord loves justice. Just camp there for a little bit. It's not just that He's just. He loves justice. He pursues justice. He is passionate about justice. He will accomplish his justice. And his justice is perfect because he is perfect, and his justice comes at just the right time. Amen? So these few verses, and are kind of hard to see on the screen, it says, we take refuge in him. Why? For any number of reasons. His perfect character. He is a God of love, so we run to him because he is loving. But he's also a God of justice, and that's why we run to him as well, because he is going to be perfectly just in our lives. And here's what I love about those verses, especially in the middle there where it talks about, I will not let him be condemned. So I think these verses fast forward over the years to the cross of Jesus Christ, where perfect justice is accomplished and perfect love is displayed. These verses span history and take us to the cross, where both the love of God and the justice of God is clearly seen and accomplished in a very beautiful, dynamic way, so everybody could always know that God is always loving, but he's also always what? Just. He always is. So I said at the beginning that this psalm is a wisdom psalm. And this psalm answers a question that we often ask. Why do the wicked prosper? Why do those who are opposed to God seem to win? Why do the righteous who are in pursuit of God seem to struggle to get by? So what is the wisdom? What does this psalm tell us as to how we can answer that question? See, the wisdom of this psalm is it tells the wise person you have to look long term. Because in this life, perfect justice is not accomplished. But in the end, perfect justice will always be accomplished. So we have to take the long view, amen? It won't be accomplished in our life. It will be accomplished when God fully makes himself known. When the God who loves justice comes to bring justice. When the God who holds the hand of his people comes to take him home. So the wise people and the wisdom of this psalm is that we don't look just at now, but we look to the future. May God help us do that. I'm going to invite the musicians.